Online. I'm Drew Clark, editor and publisher of Broadband Breakfast. If you aren't part of the program, we respectfully request that you turn your video camera off so that we will be focused on those who are. I'm actually going to kick off. This is, of course, our final show of 2020, and I am going to take a few minutes, longer than I normally do, before turning to our presenters. We have three great presenters, and for those of you who are watching and feel the need or the urge to present, you can also we should have some time towards the end of the hour, so feel free to ping me on the chat window. If you're watching this on Broadband Breakfast, you'll have to register and go to the Zoom, but it's easy to do. You should still be able to do that even right now. So we want to again welcome you to the final Broadband Breakfast Live Online event. And I wanted to take a few minutes to tell a little bit about some of my thoughts personally about the big stories of 2020. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. This is Broadband Breakfast's homepage, for those of you who can see it now. We are a source of news and a community that focuses on better broadband, better lives. This is our front page right now. So you come back here in an hour or two, it'll look different because it's a evolving a document, always changing. I happen to have put a piece that I wrote at the top, and that's what I want to show you all. But I just thought I'd give you a look at the front page if you don't normally see it. We obviously cover infrastructure as well as adoption and use, and we host these weekly events, which you all of course, are aware about. So I want to take, again, a minute or two to talk about the top 10 stories in reverse order, and I'll just say them. Many of you may have seen these in the blast that we sent out, but I thought it'd be worth kind of framing some of our thoughts on big issues that are important to us. One of them is the way China has and Chinese telecommunications companies have gone from, while not necessarily completely accepted, it's been a dramatic 18 months to be sure for Huawei, ZTE, and others, and basically the FCC and the Commerce Department have basically worked to preclude U.S. telecommunications companies from being involved and having them in their networks anymore. The next story is spectrum sharing and the role that we're seeing new types of spectrum sharing. Spectrum slicing is one facet dealing with in the 5G world, but there are many others as well. That is to say, there are many other reasons for the interest around 5G networks, but spectrum sharing is certainly one of them, and this aspect carries over into many other aspects we're seeing, such as discussions about the use of the C-band, even portions of the Citizens Broadband Radio Service network includes spectrum sharing. We've been talking for many years about open access networks and the significant role that we feel they can play in the future. They already play quite a large role in many countries' fiber networks, but they are not quite as big in the United States. I expect we'll continue to see more progress and love given towards open access networks. Number 7, the Universal Service Fund contribution level as of 3 weeks ago is now 31.8%. So nearly a third. You're paying a third again as a tax. Technically supposed to use that term because of the court case on this, but it's basically adding the cost of telecommunications 33%, 31.38% more, and that's really putting a lot of pressure on providers of telecommunications services, including VoIP, voice over internet protocol services, which, while never declared telecommunications service by the Federal Communications Commission, are taxed at that level. So that really is an issue and will continue to be an issue for 2021. Robocalls continue to be another nagging annoyance. There's been a lot of action on robocalls, but it remains to be seen how effective these actions will be in the long run. Number 6, broadband is infrastructure and it needs a map. And this is something our readers are familiar with. We've talked about this a lot over the years, but there's really renewed attention. The COVID stimulus bill that passed just less than a week ago has finally funded some aspects of the Broadband Data Act that required more detailed mapping by the Federal Communications Commission. So we're going to see definite action on this in the new year. Number 5, reverse auctions in rural broadband. I kind of just, emphasized a little bit about what a reverse auction is, because it's not necessarily obvious until you think about the way that a non-reverse auction has a seller, in this case the government, is trying to bid up the price of what they're selling, that is to say the radio frequency spectrums, from the buyers. And the FCC has been doing this for more than, well, not quite more than 30 years. It's less than 30 years, but it's getting close to that, how long they've been doing auctions. And very successful aspect of the FCC. Very few critics of the auction process that the FCC has done. Reverse auctions, however, are a newer thing. They're within the past decade that we've started to see them. And in this case, you have many sellers, broadband companies, who are bidding down the price that the government, the FCC, will be paying out to subsidize rural broadband. And there's been a lot of criticism since the auction stopped about 4 weeks ago, and we're going to, there's growing pains. It's not a clear issue, but there is a general sense, in my opinion, that reverse auctions have the promise of being a good mechanism. We'll see whether that becomes, reality as the issues surrounding the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund carry forward. Lawsuits against Google and Facebook, there have been so many of them. Where to start? The issue is going to be a big one, will be a big one. Everyone expects it to be a big one, but there's just still a lot of questions out there. It's not like it's obvious what the harm that consumers are experiencing from a Google or a Facebook. And certainly if more aggressive, progressive voices persuade a Biden administration to do an antitrust action against Amazon, they'll probably be even harder to go after an entity that's driving consumer prices down so low. Number 3, COVID-19 turns teleworking into working and distance learning into learning. Right? I mean, it's a commonplace now, but it wasn't 10 months ago that we work over broadband, we learn over broadband. And yet there are many issues about the adoption and use of broadband, how these tools can best and most effectively be used. Story number 2, the need for broadband equity, for universal broadband. I mean, it's just clearer than it ever has been that we need to make sure our country is on a path towards getting high capacity broadband, not low capacity broadband for everyone. And that, in my mind, really is all about getting higher download speeds and higher upload speeds with greater reliability, greater stability, lower latency, all those good things that those of us who care about broadband speeds and mapping have been aware of and focused on. And issue number 1, I ended with, this has been so much in the news in the last week or two. President Trump's holding up the defense budget over a demand that Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, part of the Telecom Act, is repealed. Very, very strained thinking to connect those two. And I don't think it will ultimately succeed, but it's very clear that Section 230 is a target of many people. There's no doubt that there will be discussions, continued questions about how this law will be reformed, quote unquote, revised, changed, gutted, and all bets are off on how it will happen, right? Will it happen with the net neutrality bill? Will it happen with privacy legislation? These are some possibilities that I think are possible if something gets rolling. But again, there's a lot of other issues too that are more important to deal with, in my opinion, such as getting more broadband access out for infrastructure investment, so that we don't have these glaring disparities in broadband equity. Well, that's a little more editorializing than you probably expect from me or hear from me, but it is my opinion piece, and I wanted to share it with you all and share it with our readers. We are so grateful to have for this final show of the year. And again, we'll be back next Wednesday, every Wednesday at 12 noon Eastern time with other episodes of Broadband Breakfast Live Online. But on this holiday party or New Year's party, we want to recognize innovations of 2020 and talk about predictions and hopes for 2021. And I really am very pleased that there's one of my great friends and mentors to join us. I call him America's Broadband Mayor because of his role in Fort Wayne, Indiana. Graham Richard, thank you so much for being with us here. Can you tell us a little bit about your background in broadband and then how that maybe has led you to focus on green technologies and ventures, and how you would like to characterize this issue for the new year?
Well, thank you, Drew, and I appreciate the opportunity to be with you on an earlier broadband breakfast where Blair Levin and others, we were discussing what could be in the potential for broadband deployment, particularly to serve underserved communities. So for those of you who are not familiar with the geography of my home state of Indiana, I was the mayor of Fort Wayne, Indiana from 2000 through the end of 2007 for 8 years. And early on, we decided that we could not rebuild a Rust Belt city without a 21st century technology. So we set about making sure that we were wired and inspired to retain and gain jobs in Fort Wayne, Indiana. That led to a significant broadband initiative, starting with connecting all of our schools, colleges, universities, healthcare institutions, all our public entities through a nonprofit entity that built out through a bidding process, a gigabit of fiber to all those. We also then convinced Ivan Seidenberg to choose Fort Wayne in 2004, 5, and 6 to build out FiOS in Fort Wayne, the only Midwestern build to give competition to Comcast and to bring higher speed, higher quality broadband. In addition to that, in 2007, we hosted the national conference, the Killer Applications Conference for High-Speed Broadband. We were pleased to have speakers from around the country, almost 800 folks that came to join us. And that led to my work as an informal advisor to Blair Levin and others with President Obama's broadband plan. What we emphasized was how to bring electronic medical records, at that time distance learning, energy efficiency and management systems to underserved communities. I think in the spirit of, Drew, your ask here, I want to mention two things from 2020 that we were involved in that I think may be precursors for a prediction for 2021. And that is this. We have the potential in the clean economy, particularly with the Biden-Harris plan, to accelerate the massive transition to the clean economy. And what do I mean by that? I mean those technologies that in 2020, today, now are very, very cost competitive that weren't a decade ago. What do I mean by that? Residential rooftop solar, the potential for microgrids, solar and wind, the clean economy transition, electric vehicle charging infrastructure, the transition away from the internal combustion engine, buildings that can be power plants, cars that can be power plants, electrification of transportation, electrification of many of the elements of our society. That's going to generate about, we believe, at least 10 million new jobs between now and 2030. There's an intersection of the broadband and the clean economy. Almost all of these innovations require very significant bandwidth and communications capability. So when you're putting in an electric vehicle charging station, you've got to have high quality communications systems. So the IoT and the clean economy are merging and marrying. Now to give a couple of examples. So one of the companies that I'm involved in, full disclosure, Novation Enterprises, led by Kelly Dunn. Some of you may know Kelly's work with Digital Bridge and other technology in the telecom area. He helped to co-found an organization called Warriors for Wireless. Between Novation Enterprises and Warriors for Wireless, they've trained 3,000 veterans to go into the telecom industry. We are now saying the telecom industry is essential for the clean economy industry. And we're starting with electric vehicle charging and a desperate need. Talking to Michael Render, some of you know Mike's work, he does research in the broadband space. Having employees capable, trained and ready to install the fiber networks, to install the electric vehicle charging, the electrification of buildings, there's a desperate need. And there are many veterans and many folks out of work as a result of the COVID pandemic and the economic deterioration. So in addition to the baby boomers retiring, we have a constraint in this system, which is around training jobs. Not enough electricians, not enough people that do the installation. So Kelly has a contract with, as an example, with a Alabama-based family-owned rural telecom company, rural telco, called Pine Belt. And they're one of the recipients of some of the federal dollars that can help build out. And so in an opportunity zone where there can be additional financing advantage with workers trained who are veterans and low-income folks, we're trying to blend what used to be separate silos of work into a community-based system of broadband deployment that could also, longer term, include the clean economy infrastructure. Everything from electric vehicle charging eventually to microgrids, community solar projects. So my observation, Drew, is in your observations of big trends this last year. 3 of those relate, without being identified specifically, to this merger of the broadband and the clean energy economy. My prediction, I'm going to be with you for a while, but I have another call at the top of the hour. My prediction is in the infrastructure build, we will finally see some of the restrictions on the silos of funding be removed by the Biden-Harris administration so that we can have a systems approach to benefit who we ultimately want to benefit. That single mom, 2 jobs pre-COVID, 3 kids, who has to get in her car and drive to the local Walmart or sit outside the local library because she has no broadband capacity sufficient to do what, as you said, used to be distance learning. Now it's just learning, and it's working, and through job training. A lot of the funds that come for job training, billions of dollars to every state and every community, have had restrictions that they must go for a particular type of function. We're going to see, I believe, in 2021, a relaxation of some of those rigorous silos so that we can have people trained to be able to do broadband installation as well as clean economy infrastructure installation that is needed, and that will spawn a growth of new forms of online learning, training, coaching, mentoring, and we'll see digital platforms using machine learning, artificial intelligence, augmented reality, virtual reality, absolutely explode because the demand is so great for training many more people in the digital broadband clean economy. So my enthusiastic optimism for 2021.
Well, that is awesome. And Graham, let me focus you on a point we've observed. One of our reporters, Jericho Casper, is working on a story about the Biden administration's approach to broadband. And one of the things that will be part and parcel of that is that President-elect Biden has identified 4 key priorities to address. Began to do this over the summer and really was central to the campaign, addressing the pandemic, addressing the economic disruptions that have come because of that, dealing with racial justice and racial issues, and climate change, the green economy. And the Biden administration is already talking about the role that broadband plays in all 4 of those, right? And it's, the economy, the COVID situation, and the way we're coalescing in the absence of being able to meet in person, the push for equity in broadband, and Graham, the piece you've focused on here, green jobs, right, and training. So I guess I would just want to emphasize that and agree with you that is quite significant and important as a part of the plan that we're seeing emerging. So with that, Graham, unless you want to reply or speak to that, let's turn it over now to Reg Weiser. Thank you so much for joining us. Reg is the CEO of Positron. Have I got that right? Tell us a little bit more about your company, and I want to make sure I've got the title right. So please clarify that for us, and the innovation that you'd like to share with us now, Reg.
Okay, I'm the founder and CEO, and I'm actually filling in for Pierre Trudeau, who's the president and CTO. And so
Pierre Trudeau, what talents you have to have the prime minister?
Not the former prime minister of Canada, but but I'm very active in the business and in the strategy, and essentially, as much as Graham has mentioned, underserved doesn't only exist in the rural areas, it also exists in the metropolitan areas. And the availability of high-speed internet is crucial in residential buildings and, in fact, in many other areas. So what I'd like to do is first give you some idea that you won't believe that it's technically feasible or happens, but we're actually doing it. And I'd like to discuss a technology called G.hn. Basically, this technology is an ITU standard that's much, much more robust than DSL. And it enables you, it's the same technology that is used over the power lines in individual residences to do Wi-Fi boosting. And we've adapted that technology for use on telephone pairs and also on coax. And in order to prevent any interference with other cables in the binder, we basically have something called vector boost and dynamic bandwidth allocation. So effectively, I'm first going to describe what is technically feasible with this technology, because it solves a major problem for carriers and internet service providers, because you can get a lot of fiber or fixed wireless in metropolitan areas, but you can't deliver it in the building. 5G, for example, doesn't penetrate into buildings. So you need a means of delivering it, and it costs something like $600 to basically pull fiber in old building. Most buildings are older buildings, 90% of them are older and don't have a fiber infrastructure. So I'm first going to try and, I first picked up a few slides from one of our presentation, and I'd like to see is, are you able to see this?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, so basically, first of all, I'd just like to discuss what's technically feasible, and that is this graph here shows this is the bandwidth, and this is, we start off at 1.7 gigabits. What our technology could deliver. This is in gigabit, and this is a distance slide. And there existed before a great promise to be able to deliver bandwidth in buildings, which was GFast, and except that it didn't go that far, and it had a lot of issues with interference between other wires and the bandwidth, and so and even in terms of its promise, and this is what this new technology can deliver, G.hn, and this is on a single pair. For example, over here you can see to get 1 gigabit, this could take, you can get 1 gigabit on one pair at 500 feet. But typically you've got 2 pairs, so if you go 2 pairs, you can basically get 1 gigabit at 820 feet. Even if you go all the way out here to a distance over here, let's say this distance is about 2,300 feet, this is 700 meters, you can still get 200 megabits. So it's amazing what it can accomplish over simple telephone pairs. Going to the next slide, this technology also works on coax. This is the type of coax that you get in hardware buildings. This is the type of coax in hardware stores. This is what you get in buildings. You can get a gigabit over here at 2,600 feet. So that's pretty remarkable. And to give you an idea and comparisons with technologies, DOCSIS is a technology, is a coax technology that is not tremendously cost effective, but in terms of its bandwidth, like you can't get, you can't get very high bandwidth. You might get 200 megabits maximum, and it's not very good on the upstream. GFast also has its limitations, not very costly. The best, the most cost-effective and future-proof technology, obviously, is fiber, because you can go to 10 megabits and beyond. And our product here, which we call a gigabit access multiplexer, enables you to deliver 1 gigabit symmetrical, because it dynamically allocates bandwidth, and you'll actually measure 1 gigabit if you on a speed test, upstream and downstream, to every single unit, be it in residential units, be it in businesses, or and it could even do so outdoors in houses. To give you an idea, this is how it sort of fits into the network. Whoops. This is how it fits into the network. This is one example of a type of unit. These are for coax. We've got 2 types of units work on coax cables, or units for telephone pairs. Each port here on the telephone port could be 1 or 2 pair. So it works in a MIMO mode. You basically take an input. This would be a 10 gigabit input. Could be from fiber, or this could be fixed wireless network. We're impervious to it, and you have 2 10 gigabit inputs here. And if you go over here on the telephone pair, you then convert it to G.hn, you go over to the telephone wiring, and a small little unit here the size of a deck of playing cards just before your residential gateway converts it back to Ethernet, but you get gigabit Ethernet there. On coax, you can work with existing splitters in buildings, so you can have up to 16 ports, 16 subscribers per port, which is very good. And also in coax, we also can co-reside with analog signaling. So to give you an idea, in these situations, you have massive savings. You can use the existing wiring that's there. You don't have to bypass the buildings that are just because basically they look to carriers or ISPs only go to a building if they have enough subscribers, or if they have fiber. Those are what they first want to do. Our product is scalable in the sense that you don't have to, you can even start small, and you only buy the units that you need because it's over the existing wiring. It's compatible with all the gateways. It's completely non-blocking because of the hardware we use. And the unit, and if you put the unit in, we can be with zero touch in the subscriber residence. They can put it in themselves, just plug it ahead of the residential gateway, and it's you sort of self-install, and it's got all the most advanced management features that carriers want. These are just some idea of some of the actualizations. These are indoor units, outdoor units, 4 and 8 ports, and so forth.
Reg, can I ask a question? Help situate the issue here. Obviously, for the MDU environment, we're basically talking about places that fiber comes close or to, but the challenge is getting that fiber throughout the building, right? Is that kind of the problems issue we're talking about?
That's absolutely correct. To give you an idea here, you could have if you bring the fixed wireless or fiber to the building, this could be in the telephone closet or something at the building. You put one of these units inside the building. There, you just connect it there to the telephone. You just take the telephone pair that's coming to a particular subscriber, and you go through the GAM, and the other side continues going as it currently is, right through to the end subscriber. And so it basically installs in hours, and you can deliver gigabit to each subscriber. So whatever exists in the telephone pairs, and of course it also works on coax, you don't have to redo any of the wiring in the building, and the unit could installs very quickly, and you're up and running. And you could daisy chain these units. To give you another idea, for example, this is an outdoor unit. This could be a distance away from the building. Doesn't have to be right next to the building or a cluster of houses. And this is available. This could be locally powered, but we have versions that are reverse power fed. So this could be out in the field at a fiber junction, and effectively each residence provides its share of the power needed by this unit.
This is great to kind of understand and to see, and we'll certainly include a link if we haven't already to this solution, Reg, in the page for this event. Could you just wrap up here in a 30-second conclusion about the message you'd like people to take before we turn it over to our next guest here?
Yes, effectively, carriers and ISPs now have a new solution that they can put that effectively can deliver a future-proof solution to them. Installed in hours, it gives the highest ROI, the fastest time to revenue, and it enables them to increase their subscriber base and satisfy the need essentially immediately at less than 20% of the cost of any other solution available. And people don't believe that it's possible or feasible, and that's why we offer free units on trial and so forth for people. This is now in service at 30 carriers and is in final approval stages at some of the major carriers. It is taking up steam, and we've got and many counties, like for example, Montgomery County has put it into low-cost housing where they're providing free internet Wi-Fi service. They even had fiber in the building, but they had coax in the building. They used ours over coax. They were able to provide very, very low cost to the residents, and they're doing a very good job of bridging the digital divide. And so many other communities can do the same.
Excellent. Well, thank you again for this presentation. Let's now turn it over to Mark Goldstein. And Mark, we're very happy to have you on the program. You and I, of course, had the opportunity to interact when I was involved in a state broadband initiative in Illinois, and you were involved in Arizona. You are still the chairman of the Arizona Telecommunications and Information Council. And also, I believe you have another title as president of the International Research Center. So welcome, and please feel free to take the time to tell us about your thoughts, predictions, or innovation here for 2021.
Great. Thank you, Drew. Good to see you again. We also used to hook up at the Broadband Communities Conference in various Texas cities, so still at it. Let me give a brief recap of the last couple of years in Arizona and then some predictions. So I am again chair of the Arizona Telecom and Information Council, something I helped found in the early 90s. Though we had a strategic planning effort In the last cycle, coming out of the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, all the broadband mapping and policy work, it kind of crashed and burned in 2013, that strategic plan, due to some incumbent pushback and some of the sausage making involved. But in 2018, Arizona, under the Department of Administration, did develop a strategic plan and adopt it. One of the key recommendations was that the state establish a broadband office and director. They did that. And so for almost 2 years now, we've had a gentleman, Jeff Sabatka, who came out of AT&T and T-Mobile as the state broadband director with the Arizona Commerce Authority. He's really been an energizer bunny, making things happen here. And so a couple of things that have happened. The Arizona Commerce Authority had a $3 million in legislative grants. They gave out 4 community planning grants and some bigger shovel-ready project grants, including $1 million to Mojave Electric Co-op up in the northwest corner of Arizona, kind of over by Las Vegas. And we are seeing more electric co-op activity, and the legislature actually passed regulatory revisions to enable and encourage electric co-op work here. That $3 million was projected to increase to $10 million in the last legislative session. It was in the governor's budget, but due to COVID, we had what we call a skinny legislative session. Only the absolute fundamental and necessary actions were taken by the legislature, and that didn't happen. However, the governor took $40 million from the CARES funding, the educational slice of that, and gave it to the Department of Transportation to complete a fiber build from Flagstaff to Tucson. Some elements were there, but others weren't. And so this is state-owned fiber. And so what's the use of that? Well, simultaneously, ADOT released an RFI on the street that 22 respondents came back with proposals and information for a public-private partnership to both invest further in long haul, middle mile, I guess, somewhere between middle mile and long haul fiber, and to manage that as an open access vision for that fiber. So having funded the north-south axis, the next target is I-40, which would be the east-west axis. And there's a strong element here, a group called the Sun Corridor Network, which is the 3 universities and their network that already has a significant public-facing resale of very cheap tier 1 backhaul to schools and libraries and other institutions, if you can get to them. And so the problem, of course, is could you get to their 10 gig pops in Flagstaff, Tucson, and Phoenix? Often you couldn't. Well, this fiber build, this public-private partnership, this Sun Corridor network backhaul, hopefully will all come together over the next couple of years as a new platform in Arizona. There was a 2-year special FCC E-rate build program. We were one of 17 states that managed to leverage the 100% funding of about $130 million in new fiber infrastructure to schools and libraries, with $11 million in state funding, $3 million to the Department of Ed, and $8 million in a special assessment from the Corporation Commission. That all has sunsetted, though there's a little bit of that money that remains at the Corporation Commission we're leveraging. However, this got the Corporation Commission interested again in broadband advocacy, and they currently have an open docket that we're working with them on for revising the Arizona Universal Service Fund to not only fund high-cost POTS telephony, but use that modest amount, small amount of money for broadband. So some action there. Phoenix and so ATIC, at the start of the pandemic, we took our Arizona Broadband Stakeholder Network, a group that we established to engage the broader community in concert with an educational technology group called Gazelle, and we turned it into a pandemic response broadband task force. We had probably 60 active stakeholders from education, libraries, telehealth, public safety, economic development, meeting Monday mornings at 7:30, what we called a pajama party here, video conferencing optional for your Monday morning hair.
Mark, can I jump in here?
Certainly.
You're giving us some good information about on the ground needs in Arizona, and I'm very pleased to hear about all the great stuff going on there, and the particularly the universities. And many of us know, I don't see him on the call, Lev Gonik, and I understand he's involved in some of these initiatives at Arizona State University.
Right.
But tell us a little bit about your perspective on the state role at this point in time in broadband initiatives, and how that might play into the federal role, or the perception at least that there may be some opportunities on the
Sure.
federal level for broadband. What are some of your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. So I understand, tragically, to my understanding, there was $6.25 billion in the pandemic relief package that just passed for state block grants, and I believe that was removed. Expect that to come back in some form or fashion. So I just finished a USDA Community Connect grant for a client up in Alaska, and that's for a $3 million fund, and it's an incredibly heavy lift. What I really both want and expect to see is a fresh round of block grants to the state, where the monies can be focused on regional projects from a state perspective, with nowhere near as heavy an uplift as going through USAC, E-rate programs, and USDA various programs. So though I hope and expect both consumer subsidies and waivers, putting steroids into the USAC and USDA programs, what I'm most hopeful for is that discretionary state level funding on the order of $6 or $10 billion. There's been various formulas, but an earlier $10 billion proposal, Arizona would be $200 million plus in discretionary funding. Also, to a point that Graham was making about the silos, the biggest tragedy and difficulty forever has been that you get funding for E-rate to schools and libraries, for rural telehealth, for public safety, for this, that, and the other thing. And there's no coordination or even sharing of the eventual resources. So I've learned from my library friends in Shelby the concept of to and through. So for E-rate to evolve to a to and through strategy, where all the money invested in getting fiber or services to schools and libraries can be better leveraged in the community by whatever carrier owns those resources. So certainly hoping for that evolutionary movement away from absolute siloed broadband funding to and through, or other more coordinated across the silo investment.
Okay. Let's we still have 15 minutes here to talk.
Sure.
I want to signal to our audience on Zoom, or if you're on the other channels, you can send a comment. We're able to watch those, monitor those. If you have a question you'd like to ask, either in the chat window, go for it, or if you'd like to be on camera, just send me a private message and I'll be able to turn that over to you. We certainly have three different presentations about thoughts and innovations. While we're waiting for some questions to come in, let me ask Graham and Reg if you have any thoughts on some of the things Mark has said. Let me ask Graham in particular what your thoughts are on the state and federal collaboration, what other players, business community, for example, again, smashing silos, part of what we're trying to address here, but can you also speak to the federal state issue too? Graham, let's turn it over to you.
Well, I've had the opportunity, full disclosure, to be a part, Drew, of what's called Clean Energy for Biden. And when we started that initiative, there were a few hundred of us, and we ended up with over 12,000 to support the agenda and write position papers. I think the concept of the block grants that Mark had mentioned is a concept that has to do with policy decisions, not just from the White House, but it has to also come from Congress. So what we're seeing, interestingly, is the energy efficiency block grant money that was similar to the housing block grant money that came to cities like Fort Wayne, but then faded away. We're seeing in Congress a recognition that making dollars available directly to states and cities to be able to use those dollars to benefit the terrible burden that low-income people are facing. Mark, your point, whether they're in an urban area like Fort Wayne, perhaps in an opportunity zone. And so what I am hopeful for is that we have people who were experienced with the ARA funding.
ARA referring to the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act model in the Obama administration, 2009.
Right. And we know, Drew, from the evaluation of that 900 billion at that point, what worked and what didn't. And we know that if you're going to solve the problem of a person who's lost their job, is on unemployment, wants additional job training, wants to be able to get back to work, wants to move away from a field where they couldn't currently make a living. We have many people in hospitality, for example. We have many people in relatively lower paying service jobs. And so, Drew, what I think is going to happen is this president's likelihood of working to solve the pandemic has to be collaborative with folks on the ground. That means the governors, that means the mayors, the county executives. And I think that that ethic of reducing some of the burden of red tape. So for example, the president caught some heat for reappointing Vilsack again at USDA. One of the reasons he did that was because that's a very complicated and important agency for dollars flowing to local communities. And so I think he wanted somebody who could immediately be a part of this redesign of how you would think about RUS and the economic development, the RDA. And so my hope is that at the White House level, whether it's the Council of Economic Advisors or key other advisors, they won't just say, these dollars go through the Department of Labor to the state, to the local community for job training. They will say, we're going to relax some of the same point Mark was making, some of the deep criteria that make it so difficult for siloed money to be used to solve the problem of that worker, that single mom who wants to get a job, take care of her kids, and there's money that can come to be of help. Let me give two examples. One example is for if you're a veteran, and there are many women now that are veterans, you have in federal law entitlement dollars that frequently go unused because the veteran doesn't know how to get those dollars for the GI Bill, for training, for re-education, and so what we're trying to do is build a platform that takes what the individual veteran gets as a trainee with Novation in the telecom and the clean energy space and help that person understand how to go back and get their benefits so that they can use them to get back on their feet post-COVID. And that's going to take some relaxation, Drew, of some of the regulations. And I think we're going to see that happen from this White House.
Excellent point about Secretary Vilsack. Certainly, we've heard these criticisms, and it was a marvel to me. He was one of the few, Vilsack, who stayed 2 terms in the Obama administration, and I have some familiarity through family connections that he's an exceptional administrator. So it's good to hear that. Now, not just to kind of be very pro ARA. I mean, I'm sympathetic to that. Of course, I was involved in the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act program, the state broadband initiative, and certainly we saw a lot of good out of that. There are, though, critics who say that the most effective way to channel money is through competitive processes. And this is why we have seen some interest and energy in things like reverse auctions, which I made reference to. Now, of course, there's been criticism because it seems like there's problems with it, or people are very curious as to how some of the award winners, at least provisionally, of the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund grants will be able to deliver on those promises. I'm wondering if any of the 3 of you would like to comment on this tension between subsidies through a system like a reverse auction or through a competitive process versus the relaxation that I'm hearing from you, Graham, and from you, Mark. And Reg, I don't know if you have any thoughts on this, but feel free to chime in. Mark, let's turn to you first.
Sure. The thing about reverse auctions and that whole kind of process of subsidies to providers is it shuts out communities and any plans they may have or want to initiate. They're never going to play in that world. And so I believe there needs to be a balance. And the balance has been horribly tilted towards that side, towards the subsidy to commercial carriers, whether it be the RDOF or, all sorts of other ways, and against community. And so that's why I really, even back in the ARRA, you had to apply to the feds with your state kind of vetting which proposals it thought were its best as kind of a recommendation base. What I really want to see and expect to see is some slice of the money go to states as a more loosely structured federal block grant where the states set up their rules, set up their criteria. I've been talking to at least 2 states about how they would weigh and evaluate various proposals against the communities that are being targeted to be served. And so I believe in both, but that the community basis has been the least well served up to now.
Okay. Graham, any further thoughts on this point? Reg?
I believe subsidies to carriers has been useful. It certainly has increased penetration, but really it needs to be supplemented by grants to states and other areas. For example, if you look at RDOF as an example, you've got grants, you've got things of this nature. Now we come in and we offer them be able to serve much more cost effectively at a fraction of the cost, and but they already have their grant at the higher amount. And essentially, if communities such as Montgomery and other counties and so forth can provide high-speed bandwidth at something like 20% of the cost of what it otherwise costs, they can also reduce the cost to the underserved. So I think that's a neglected area and should be focused on as well.
Drew, let me comment on 2 parts of your question. One, we're not going to undo some of the silos. So we have to kind of recognize that that's harder to get done. However, one of the biggest problems that the Biden-Harris administration and Congress can address immediately is to make sure that it's very clear and very fast for the delivery of whatever it is, the block grants, the existing funding dollars. One of the problems with the funding that came in the Recovery Act was there was an expectation that there was going to be a big windfall of direct grants. That put a freeze from a business point of view on a lot of private sector investment. And so I believe there are solutions to that, and that the White House can make sure that we don't do something unintentional, which is to actually freeze existing investments waiting to get a better deal. And so if you have a state-based match, if you have a private-public partnership commitment, if you have a system by saying that we will reward those who continue right now, today, to proceed with the investments that are already billions of dollars from the private sector. There's rumors that major big players are going to come back into high-speed fiber optic broadband, both infrastructure, first mile, last mile, middle mile. I don't want to discourage that private sector capital from coming in at a time when we need that work and need that infrastructure. So I think, Drew, that's the issue that is of the most immediate concern from my point of view.
And on that point, I know you have to leave it, and we will end right at the top of the hour. But do you have any thoughts on the future of opportunity zones, which I did note as perhaps the one infrastructure initiative that did pass in the Trump administration? I know you've been very involved and interested in that topic. Where do you think that fits in this picture, if at all, Graham?
The Biden-Harris team has made it clear that they are not going to reverse that. You know, that was a bipartisan bill by Senator Tim Scott and Senator Cory Booker. They will require more disclosure. They will require more communication between the local, there are 8,700 opportunity zones, and we're seeing billions of dollars of capital, private capital, including in my hometown, flow into projects to restore dinosaur buildings and dead malls. And so I don't think, and by the way, we're looking at financing broadband, particularly fiber optic broadband infrastructure in opportunity zones. Those projects are moving ahead. So you don't want to disincentivize previously committed private sector investment by this, okay, we're going to change everything goes on a halt. I don't think the Biden administration is going to do that. I think they realize they want to continue to stimulate public and private dollars to go into what I'm using the term the clean economy infrastructure, and I by that mean all kinds of digital communication, digital and broadband communication. So I think we're going to see an acceleration actually of investment from the private sector in opportunity zones.
Okay, we got 3 minutes left, minute or less each for each of you. Mark, Graham, and Reg.
Just a thought, something that's really surprised me and I think is indicative of trends to come, is that I'm seeing a lot of programs from both schools and municipalities to give laptops and tablets with 2 years of included cellular service and SIM cards to students, to disadvantaged households. And once they get them, not only is the student or the adult in the household, whoever's using that tablet or laptop, enabled, that has a Wi-Fi hotspot capability. So giving out tablets or laptops with no data cap cellular service for an extended period of time, to me has been a paradigm shift. I hadn't anticipated it, but I'm really coming to like it. So I'd like to see more of that because it jumpstarts a lot of the rigmarole about getting connections to people and investing in building those connections. You kind of jump the shark with that.
Very good.
I just wanted to raise that point.
Any final 30-second thoughts, Graham?
I'm good. Happy New Year to all.
Hey, thank you. Reg, we'll give you the final word then.
I think it's great that we're supporting fiber everywhere, fixed wireless and so forth, going for the rural areas with RDOF and that. But this forgotten area that still has to be addressed much more strongly is a digital divide in the metropolitan areas and getting the bandwidth to the individual residential units. That's crucial, and that should be something done at the local levels.
Well, thank you for that thought. That is an awesome thought to conclude on, Reg, because it is something we've thought about here at Broadband Breakfast, that we it's important that we focus on rural broadband, but it's also important we focus on urban broadband, right? Or the broadband equity issues. And we definitely plan to focus on that in the new year at Broadband Breakfast Live Online. Thank you for being part of this special year-end show. Happy New Year to all. Next Wednesday, January 6th, 2021, we'll be back with a discussion about Biden and the broadband and the Biden administration, part 3 of a 3-part series we've had. I'm Drew Clark. Thank you for being with us.